we really will change the face of the economy and at the same time, our lives.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome again to another edition of Beyond Encryption's podcast. As I tend to find myself reminding everybody, this one's called Sense of Identity. We set this up to sort of start to focus on people that are doing really interesting stuff around us. We're an innovative, inventive nation, and it also feels appropriate just at this moment to say proud to be British, etc. And yet the financial services industry sometimes seems to be glacial around its pace of change. And that's going to be a theme we'll come back into. And we'd like to focus on people that are doing extraordinary things. So with those words, I'd like to just welcome Liz Brandt and Nick Cabrera, the co-founders of Ctrl-Shift.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
And I'm going to give a very short synopsis of something I saw on your website, and then there were lots of things we wanted to ask you, and we've got a relatively limited time here. But your website talks about, importantly, the sort of consultancy work that you guys do. Strategic innovation, are the words that lead there, and data is a word that's really key. Another one that I know when we chatted briefly was around change, because it's not a word that I think our industry is good with, and therefore it needs help with change. And I think that's an area that you guys are specialists in. But I think the first piece, and maybe if you can give us a bit of an entree to Ctrl-Shift and what you do, is tell us a bit about Ctrl-Shift, how you guys got together and why you set the business up to head down the path you have, if I may.
Yeah, we set Ctrl-Shift up 15 years ago, and Nick and I more recently founded Ctrl-Shift Exchange. So Ctrl-Shift was originally set up to provide strategic advisory services to enable that change. We had a vision that we would all be creating more data. And you're right, data is a word we use quite a bit. But that data wasn't just more, it was more personal. So if you get more personal data, to enable us to get the value out of it, we'd have to create a different type of information sharing relationship between organizations and individuals. And that's what we set about understanding that empowered individual and what that would mean to our economy, to our businesses and to our lives, actually. And we've done a lot of work over the years. We set it up 15 years ago, tidgy-tadge early, I would say. But who cares? 10 years or so, it's what's 10 years between friends. But we have done lots of work in that time, which means that we have a huge amount of knowledge about how this market functions. So we've advised governments all over the world. We've worked with the World Economic Forum and World Bank and multiple international organizations. We've also worked with huge brands like Meta and Sainsbury's and HSBC and Suncorp and Renault and Verizon and all sorts all over the world on advising on what does this future look like and how do we get from here to there. And that's given us this massive knowledge base. And when Nick and I set up Ctrl-Shift Exchange, what we wanted to do was make that knowledge available to the marketplace to enable everybody to accelerate. And we started doing that with the impending legislation in the UK, which would give us a nice catapult, a nice jumping off point for the exchange. So in the consulting, Ctrl-Shift Consulting, we do all our consulting work. And then in exchange, we do our work around bringing together communities, exchanging knowledge from us to other people, but also between other people and collaborating and building out that knowledge base into the markets. That's us at a sort of top level. We work a lot with government in helping them to change and design smart data programs. And I'll talk a bit about smart data because it's a key component part. But also we work with other government bodies around how, and we've more recently been doing that around what all this change and the use of data will mean for them and how they can grow and how they can contribute to our innovative nation that you talked about. And also, quite obviously, we work with businesses, mostly large businesses, helping them design new digital services responsibly and understand the impact and the opportunity to take strategic positions in the marketplace and enable them to grow strategically in the future. And a lot, actually, including around AI, around creating efficiency, how data can enable us to create efficiency. Yeah, 15 years. We're a bit early, but we are now super trendy, quite obviously. Okay.
Absolutely.
Just know, right? No
Yeah.
longer am I the sad dinner party guest who says, I work in data, and everybody goes, oh no. Everybody goes, oh, that's very interesting. That's timely. But Nick, maybe you want to talk a bit about the forum and the work
Well,
we're doing around.
yeah, exactly. I mean, what's been interesting, because I've come from, before working with Liz, from the world of open banking. So I ran one of the world's largest communities of open banking executives for many years. And everybody talks about open banking being the start of the revolution. We're going to go to open finance. And then we coined a term which other people use, but not quite in the right context, called open data. And I remember talking to Liz about this when we were organizing our own event, which Liz got very, very well involved in. She kept saying, it's not open data. You need to call it smart data. But interesting how and this world we're in is all about terminology. And I think what's going to be interesting watching in the next 12 months is try and coalesce our terminology so we all know what we're talking about. So yes, Exchange is really all about all the knowledge that sits in the consulting business, repurposing it, making it available to the wider UK and eventually the global community of people who want to learn about smart data. So
Perfect.
building events obviously is what we do, and we do it well. We're going to roll out more of these events in the future. We'll tell you more about later. But also we need to communicate more. So we're launching a newsletter. We want to build communities. We want to curate groups. So we'll talk about what we're going to do with smart data and create somewhere for the UK, for a start, smart data community to converge, not just in person, but on platforms that enable them to share and collaborate.
So you have been very kind enough to invite us to the first 2 smart data forums that you've run. Some amazing events. We have attended alongside some pretty impressive names, from Google to the government, from social networks to high street banks, some real giants when it comes to the data world. They are very collegiate environments where people are happy to discuss what they've been doing and how they've done things and what's gone right and what's gone wrong, which is really, really encouraging, I think, for the whole movement of smart data. But I guess as an intro to that subject, can you give us a bit of a definition of smart data?
Okay, shall I have a go? I'll have a go at that one. So smart data, it's been developing for the last few years, actually, as a program of work that's been it's named by government. And I have to say, we have to give somebody some credit. I don't know who it is for the name, because it's gone through loads of iterations. It started off being called My Data, and then it was called Biocentric Data. I mean, we've had some crazy names. So smart data is a really smart name, because what it's doing is aiming to make our data, and indeed organizations' data, available in the market to enable us to be smart. Okay, so what does that mean? Sounds easy. I said it in a sentence, full stop on the end. Great grammar. But what does that really mean? So it means we've got to get data from organizations that currently hold it in a standardized, machine-readable, portable form, where the data can be used in a very low impact way, if you see what I mean. So any organization, including small organizations, can then use that data, so it's accessible. And Nick talked about open banking. Open banking, it's a real trailblazer for some of this, because some of the component parts from open banking will be reused. So APIs that enable the data to flow, application interfaces that enable the data to come out of the organization, standardized, and then data that's standardized. So when you get it, you know what it is and where it comes from as well. So it'll be provenance stamped. And then around that, and really importantly, so you can open up this data, but if you do it, you create all sorts of problems, including privacy problems, right? So around that, how do we create the governing structures to enable that to be used in a way which enhances the individual's privacy and organizations' rights and so forth, but also enables organizations to use it? So we've got a component.
You used the word earlier, Liz, I think syncs beautifully what you just described, which is empowerment. It's about empowerment, usage of how the data can serve the better whether that's ultimately a consumer. But I think for me, that's a
Yeah.
great.
I agree, Paul. I think, standardizing the data and making it available in a way that's safe so that only the right people can access it, etc. The key bit, though, is when you start to get into the components, if you want to call it that, of the infrastructure that do empower the individual. So the parts that currently that aren't there. Organizations have all this technology that enables them to manage all their data. But we individuals, I mean, if you'd seen me earlier on, you'd seen piles of paperwork, right, all around me, because that's what everybody's life looks like. We're surrounded by it, and I think we're being turned into like warm body integration units, where this data all arrives on a desktop, and then we have to do all this ridiculous admin, right? So why can't I have data that enables me to make my life more efficient, empowers me to make my life more efficient? And that's really where this starts to take us. I mean, it also makes businesses more efficient, which is fantastic because hopefully they can reinvest and make my life more efficient, right? But that makes them more efficient. It also opens up all of the opportunities for businesses to provide all this new value to you and me. Yeah. So if I'm going to buy a house, I want a service that takes all the data and manages it, stops it being 220 days of absolute agony, down to 30 days of, quite nice and peace and quiet, and not having to chase lawyers to pick up bits of paper from the land registry, right? So this is what we want. We want something that helps us to manage our lives better, and something that helps us make better decisions, because right now we're pretty much in the blind, right? So we're wandering around in the dark trying to make decisions. We're basically taking things that are served up to us by the likes of Google, etc., and taking what they say as read as to the best product I can buy or the best holiday I can get to, etc. Whereas actually, I think we need more data to help us understand the best decisions for us.
And also we actually just published, I think, a podcast we recorded with Angela Hesketh, who was on your panel, I think, at the original Smart Data Forum, because PECs are a great example of this, aren't they? As a thread, a really important thread, but in terms of property purchase and data and streamlining processes and empowerment and all those words. So that the point is the combination of all these different companies that are experts in their own domain is that's the challenge, isn't it?
Totally. And property purchasing is one of the parts of the market that the government are really keen to support the opening up of. I mean, it supports some of their policy activities as well, but quite obviously there's a double side to this, which is it enables us all to have a more peaceful life. So that's one of the areas. It's also in energy. So fascinating, right? So how do we all get to net zero? Well, it seems that actually we all need to generate electricity. And when you start to think, well, what's data got to do with that? Well, by all accounts, data helps them manage the whole electricity network, balance the flow of the electricity, and not blow us up, which is a bit of a bonus, really. If we're all generating data locally, they have to understand if we're all generating energy locally, they have to understand how much energy you're generating, how much you're likely to generate, what's the cloud cover looking like, and how much you're going to use. And by the way, just an extra little fun and games, how much are you going to put into your car, your electric vehicle, and then drive it to another part of the country and plug it in there? So if you don't get that balance right, we haven't got an electricity network. So we've got to get this right. So there's energy, there's property, there's transport, there's health, which is another amazing area for value in this space. So health and well-being, and helping us not end up in the sick system, which is the NHS here.
And I think another interesting opportunity that smart data is going to be able to deliver is, apart from commercial value, which companies and individuals are going to benefit from, there's social value as well. The ability to use that data to create insights that can alert authorities, health services, or financial services that there's an impending problem with an individual based on their patterns and behaviors and spends and energy use and transport use or their location. That really, we're at the tip of the iceberg of beginning to explore how far that can go. I mean, I don't know if it's an overused term, but I mean, we are almost at we're in this third industrial revolution around data. And what seems to be the case is UK is very much at the forefront of this and really thinking way ahead than most other countries and how this is going to work. And, hopefully like we did with open banking, we're going to spearhead this as well internationally, but not just purely in terms of what it is for the consumer, for the business, but also for civil society. How else can society benefit?
For me, there's a lot of real positivity that can be had around the sharing of data, rather than everything being so siloed, to actually combine different sources to get a richer picture of whether it's an individual or a company or an entire energy network. But pulling in those extra bits of data and combining to get that wider view is incredibly important, and that's where I can easily see that there are great efficiencies to be gained as an economy, as much as anything else. And there are other sort of target areas or problem areas that people have struggled, or businesses have struggled to really get to grips with and to deliver the best solutions. So things like we talk a lot about identifying and managing vulnerability amongst our customers, but we don't have a centralized way of recording people's vulnerability or good enough ways to identify and inform others of such an issue for someone, even if it's a transient thing, a moment in time. That same vulnerability will impact them in everything that they do, rather than just the one thing they may do with you today. So things like that, for me, you're able to lift those up to a whole new level, rather than, again, just creating another silo.
I totally agree. And we often say, I came out of the CRM market. Okay. So I told everybody, gather all this data. It's your crown jewels. Never share it with anybody. You'll know so much about Paul and Adam and Nick. So you'll be able to do everything for them. Okay. Well, that was absolute rubbish, right? Because the data, yeah, okay. It's like peeking in through my letterbox, right? Into my life. That's all it is. And I often say it's like they're trying to get to the moon, which is understand Liz, right? And they're sort of doing it by making a longer ladder, whereas actually what they need is a rocket ship, right? So don't make longer ladders, make a rocket ship. And smart data is a rocket ship. It enables people to really be understood and to share that information about them in a way that means that organizations can really understand how to serve them. And you're right, that point about vulnerability, it's an incredible opportunity, because one of my close relatives has Alzheimer's. It's very unfortunate, becomes completely unable to use digital services and or telephones. You listen to him speaking on the phone to the bank, and although he's registered with the bank as having Alzheimer's, they're rattling stuff off, press this button, do that, da, 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 da. It's like, no. You need to pass this man to somebody who can actually help him get through this process. Somebody whose brain is functioning at a million miles an hour and can just rattle it all off and read it off a script. This is not going to work, And the banks have a responsibility. They have a responsibility in law to help vulnerable people, and yet they don't yet have a systematized and an efficient way of achieving that, and smart data takes them there.
When we've chatted before, Nick and Liz, you've beautifully explained and cited other examples geographically that other economies that have leveraged this approach with success, not without their challenges. Where do you think the UK is? If we're trying to look at some of these challenges, how are we faring? Are we on the up? Do you think we're sort of starting to move a bit with people like yours help? It's the only reason these things happen, isn't it? I mean, the experts, they're going to drive the theme on. But where do you think we are on the global landscape of this topic?
Well, I think with the passing of the bill, we probably are, in terms of regulation specifically for smart data, which is around data portability and rights and so on. I think we're pretty much at the top of the moment. I mean, if you look around the world, everything else is being based around the extension of open banking into open finance, and then touching certain areas that may expand and touch in insurance or in one or two places, healthcare and so on. So if you look, for example, our immediate neighbors in the EU, there is an EU Data Act, there's a Data Governance Act, but they're more about the broader infrastructure data sharing rather than scheme driven, which is what we're looking here in the UK. So it's still very broad, very much infrastructure and IoT and device based, with some elements of health data sharing, which are beginning to kick in. And if you then go for a little bit more focus into Europe, you look at places like Estonia, and people have quoted Estonia a lot in the past. They have something called Extra, but it's a secure system-to-system exchange of information, which is really more about the government. It's a government data for everybody within that country. It's got it's mature now. It's quite widely used. It's more about infrastructure again, and also not scheme-based. Again, we tick the box again that we got scheme-based systems. Ukraine, very current in the news, has a DIIA platform, which is again a super app for everybody in Ukraine, and it provides government services, data sharing again across very narrow level of services. It's again not quite scheme based, but it's providing core infrastructure. So we're seeing data infrastructure being built in certain parts of the world. Brazil has moved fast from open banking to open finance, much faster than we've done in the UK. And they're now beginning to explore how do they share consumer data into other cross sectors. Now, that's not yet been fully regulated, but they're working on it. And they'll be an interesting country to watch in the future. Australia, going further south in this globe we live in, they've got the consumer data rights. That is probably the closest to the UK because it's about portability and also has an element of action initiation, where consumers can give instructions for data to be shared. So that lenders are kicking in 26. So that's going to become a little bit more useful. Bhutan, Liz, do you remind me, what are they doing in Bhutan now? It's still government central, isn't it?
Well, it's a bit of a mixed architecture. They've got some centralized services, definitely the option for decentralized, so where the individual at the edge can hold their data and have a reusable digital identity. It's been driven by government. The architecture, it was inspired by the king, who went to study in MIT, okay, and then came back and went, I've got this great idea, let's do this. And they've got, as I say, decentralized identities, decentralized data, and they've created this infrastructure, which they're now out selling. Actually, they've turned it into a separate business. They've floated it off from government. It's now a separate business, and they're now out selling that architecture into places like Africa, where they've got like Bhutan, started as a rural idyll and ended up with one of the most advanced decentralized data infrastructure in the world, actually, for not very many people, but all the same, transformed their economy, 500% uplift in GDP in 3 years. I mean, transformed it. And then they're selling it into other countries. But the other thing that Bhutan are doing is you wouldn't believe it, they're building a smart city. Okay, and they're going to use this new data infrastructure to enable the whole smart city. And they're inviting people from universities to go and live in this, graduates from university to go and live in this smart city with this data, which they're investing in to help grow these new services on top of it. It's a really inspired and totally heartfelt, approach to how this develops. Whereas we're slightly different. Nick's right, it's happening all over the place. We came to this stage a little bit late, mostly because we had COVID and we had Brexit, to be frank, so government were focused on a couple of other things. Okay, so now we're here, but I find it was pretty sad during that period of time because it's a bit quiet, to be frank, but now we're here, it's all systems go. Press the big green button, let's get going. Now the technology is actually caught up with the vision that the whole of the UK had in 2011, right? We had this vision in 2011. We put it onto statute book in 2013. Now we're at 2025. But what's great is the technology has actually caught up with the vision. The other thing that makes the UK both strong and weak, and actually differentiates ourselves from places like India or Bhutan and some parts of Africa, for instance, is we have a lot of regulation.
Yeah.
So that's great because it holds us in position and it creates levers for change. But it's really bad because it holds us in position. So we're gonna work out how to make that agile.
Yeah. So how do we get that right? I guess the safety net that regulation brings us versus the anti-innovation that it brings us, and how do we get that balance right and make sure that we are all very respectful and protective of people's data, whilst at the same time exploring what we could do if we had it all available to us. How do we get that correct balance, do you think?
And supplement that a little bit and avoid the pension dashboard syndrome, because you can't help but look at that and think, oh, please no, not another one of those. This needs to happen, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think there's a number of things we have to do. I think the person who named this smart data potentially also designed the legislation they've just passed. So I give them double bubble thumbs up, because not only did they come up with a good name, they created a piece of legislation which isn't regulation. Okay, it is enabling legislation. It's an umbrella that gives the government powers to move forward. So they can then, this is something I never thought I'd know this about government, but here we go. Once you've got that enabling legislation, you can pull out secondary instrument, a statutory instrument, which can be developed, a new piece of law that can be developed within the space of a year. So instead of like a 4 or 5 year program of consultation and through the House of Parliament and House of Commons and then rewriting and reports and so on, so it goes straight to the House of Parliament, and the minister responsible can sign it off. So that means we can get these schemes designed. So we could, as Nick pointed to, they're scheme based. So we can get this governing schemes designed and signed off, ready for use within a year. And I mean, it's going to be hard for businesses to actually catch up, which is going to be a bit interesting. But also, and really importantly, the same goes for some of the data infrastructure. They're working at the moment on data intermediaries. This is to your point, Adam. How do we make this safe? These data intermediaries that act on behalf of the individuals that we talked about earlier on, empower the individuals, have a duty of care to the individual to help them manage their data on their behalf. So that's also a statutory instrument which can be gone through Parliament in a year if they choose to, and if there's support from the market to do it. I mean, we don't want to put something out there and nothing happens, but the work you guys have been doing in that space really starts to set the tone. It starts to set the pace, because this is one of the key component parts. I go back to the electricity market. If you think about the electricity market, I think that data intermediaries acting on my behalf is something like a substation. That means the electricity that comes into my house doesn't blow it up, right? So I think about data intermediary as the thing that helps me not blow my life up, really, with my data, or blow anything else up. Talking about blowing things up. But yeah, I think this is a component of our data infrastructure that's missing completely. And that can be brought into play in the space of years. So that agile regulatory environment, I think that's going to be a real winner for the UK.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that did, sorry, Nick, one thing is I need you to embellish something for me as well. So when I was is when you talk about blowing things up, when you cited Bhutan and the GDP growth figure, you've got to believe the government have got to be bought into this, because growth is the only way they can see the country come out of bankruptcy. I would call it bankruptcy, but yeah, you said it. But so what part do you think, Nick, that do you see this could absolutely play the same sort of role for the UK's growth?
Well, yes, but I think in a way it's not about us here being convinced of that. It's about convincing the investors, because what we need to be able to do alongside this is build confidence in the investment community that the UK is going to generate the equivalent of fintechs. I think we still need to give them a name for our emerging, let's call them smart techs or whatever it is. But there needs to be the right message from government to encourage and give confidence to investor community that smart techs are going to be the potential unicorns of the future for the UK and for the wider economy. I mean, this is what we were good at the beginning. When open banking came up, boom, we had a whole raft of fintech startups building up, being invested in, great, opportunities. And what we don't want to repeat, as you mentioned earlier, is find ourselves in the same position that open banking was in, which was too constrained to allow for a wider application of the principles that maintained investment in very narrow channels. This, as you can imagine, if we're talking about cross-sectorial data sharing, has the opportunity to attract much larger scale investors and a wider pool of investors who understand some of the market, some of these potential schemes we're going to be looking and working with. So I think that's a big part of it. And I think, interestingly enough, again, it's where do we generate these entrepreneurs from? I keep referring to open banking, but people in finance, when they heard about open banking, could see the opportunities within their sector as they were working in banks. We need to be able to have a wider message as well to the wider business community about the opportunities that exist. So those entrepreneurial people within those businesses, we can start spinning their cogs to visualize opportunities and visualize where they could build their own business in that place. So yeah, that's where I can see it going.
I agree, Nick. And look at something like open banking. I think people just don't realize how many unicorns it actually did create. I mean, Plaid had a valuation in 2025 of 6.1 billion, right? Completely out of open banking. And if we do that in multiple markets, which we are able to do, we really will change the face of the economy and at the same time our lives.
I think anyone listening to this would be, I would hope, very interested in the subject, very interested to learn more. And just go back to my previous point around your amazing event, Smart Data Forum. You've got the next one planned, I understand. Where can people find out more and how to get involved?
So we're in the middle of getting things ready to announce the 2026 edition. The current website for this year's event is still live, smartdataforum.org, and we'll post that for those who want to see it. People can pre-register their interest in the 26th event there. And also as an additional initiative to help garner momentum within some of these key sectors, we're also going to be organizing a series of 3 short one-day mini forums, specifically on the property market, the energy market, and financial services. Property is going to be in December, energy in February, and finance in April. And the idea is that we need to bring together the key stakeholders with government and industry at a senior level. We need to bring them together to hear what everybody else is doing in this space. One of the big fears that Liz and I have is that we're going to see lots of initiatives, lots of bodies trying to spin their own set of standards and governance structures, and they're all going to be spinning off in different directions, but nobody really knows who's doing what and how can they collaborate and keep the momentum focused in the right direction. So the aim of these events is to bring these interesting and fascinating groups together, bring an opportunity for the government to hear what else is going on, bring the businesses that are already looking to be active in these markets to understand what they need to know, hear what's happening next, hear what the government has to say. And again, it's a limited build per sector we're planning to launch. So we'll be announcing details of these by the end of this month and early October.
There are lots of challenges to progress, but I know you guys have been, mentoring as part of the Smart Data Challenge. We were, really delighted to be selected as one of the finalists there. But, all of this, is trying to rally support and visibility and make sure people really are trying to think about a new world in reality. because the impact can be so extraordinary. And just one, I say those words and warnings about say dashboard. It does feel this. For me, it feels this has a different level of momentum attached to it. It really feels a lot more serious. And that's not trying to belittle or change, the great work that some have done in dashboard, but it felt such a thin part of a much broader issue that somehow smart data seems to have rallied a really serious view on how we can change the economy. So I certainly hope that that's where we're leading.
Yeah. I think what's interesting about where we can go with all of this is just, as you said, we're not stuck on narrow rails, but what we need to make sure we have is an infrastructure that allows the ability to pour data across sectors, regardless of the type of data. Because I think the challenge we face is not, apart from the impetus and the imagination of doing things, is actually making sure that we have a good set of standards that allows the sharing of data between sectors and between businesses to be compatible. Need compatibility in data. Interestingly, though, we haven't really talked about this. AI offers another interesting opportunity because AI could have also play a major role in how data is going to be shared, and also its own ability to generate a boost to the economy. Because AI, not only can it, we're hearing a lot about agentic AI and how that could make our lives easier, our businesses could use agentic to improve their services. But it also has an opportunity all in its own, in which people using AI as their representatives in the data world. And I think that, again, we're only just touching the surface of where that's going to go. And we're talking about scales of economy, but I think fundamentally it's about how accessible is the data? Is it readable? Does it make sense? Have we given permission for that data to be shared? Do we trust the entities that are going to be using that data? And can we, at some point, trace how far our data has gone? That is a big question, obviously. But fundamentally, if we don't get this bit right, then consumers will not have the confidence in using and being part of the future data landscape.
I agree.
Can I just put a plug in for something particular? I sat on the Financial Conduct Authority advisory group when they were looking at open finance, which then initiated the pensions dashboard. I was just trying to see when it was, but it was way before Brexit, I think, a long time ago, right? And so my life is compartmentalized in those things: COVID, Brexit, and previously. So it was a long time ago. I would advocate that it needs a complete restart, but not because I've got my hand on it at all and understand exactly what's going on. But when we think about what we've talked about, completely different technologies available today, completely different architectures available today, completely different pressures in the market today. Everything has changed from then, really, and consumers are in a totally different place, right? So I think pensions dashboard needs a restart, but that's, that would be my take on it. I think otherwise it's going to sit there and be very, very challenging for all of us for a long time. I don't want to retire on that.
It needs to be part. It needs to be part of this, doesn't it? Really, smart data should be all encompassing, and dashboard just happens to be one part. Sorry, Adam.
I was going to say, just picking up on Nick's point. I think that the evolution of AI through that time, you go back to a lot of the challenge with getting the pension dashboard into a position where people could work with it. The big challenge was around access to data and the ability to present that data in a format that people needed it to be in, to be able to compare and combine. Whereas AI now can take that data in all sorts of different ways and fashions and present it as a unified, integrated display result. So things have changed through that protracted time, that if we were back to that, I wouldn't start here if I was you type situation. But if people did start that journey today, it would be a lot easier than it was.
And, people need to have the courage to make that decision. And the trouble is, we've got people who've made investments, and I understand that, and it's really difficult, but we've got to have the courage to say, stop that, start something new. And I think it's taken us a while to be able to say, open banking hasn't solved all the problems that we need to solve for smart data, and therefore we've got to solve for smart data. Everyone's like, oh, let's just roll open banking forward. It's like, well, okay, that's going to be a very difficult user experience if nothing else, and we will just constrain growth. So and we've got there now. We're now designing new infrastructure for smart data. I think we need to just be brave and say, let's get on with it with the pensions dashboard in a different way, in a different era.
It's amazing how much time we can chew through just chatting around this topic. It's such a huge one. For one, I'm really relieved that you guys are at the forefront of these discussions, because certainly the events that we've been along to and the chats we have, I was really enjoy chewing the cud on this, because it's just such a complicated thing to try and pull together. So I think you've done an amazing job personally. So congratulations to you on that. We always like to finish these things off with and I'm sure at some point a montage will come out at us with all the massive experience you guys have got. If you had a chance to, give your younger self a little bit of advice, what would it be?
Shall I ever go first, Nick?
Go on then.
Okay, so I would say, on a serious note, trust your instincts, because smart data matters. I know there were certain times when I was like totally despondent, thinking I'd actually gone a bit mad in those 15 years. I'd also say, don't waste time trying to define it perfectly. That was an awful lot of time spent and quite a lot of money spent trying to define it early on, and things, as we've said, move on. Say yes to crazy pilots. That's a must. Okay, there's some fantastic stuff going on out there, and just say yes to it. But probably the biggest piece of advice is invest in chocolate factories, because I've eaten a lot of chocolate over that time.
You've got a poncho for chocolate. I wonder if that might come out. Brilliant. That's wise words.
Well, there's a couple of things. One is act on your instinct, on your gut instinct. The first milliseconds you feel about doing something or working with someone, I tend to always fall on that. And I think that's really important. And I think, secondly, you have to respond to change of circumstances with positivity. Life throws us all sorts of challenges all the time. Never get into the gloom and doom. You look for the positive. You look for challenges. Life is full of challenges. When you come across challenges, it's like flowing water. That's a good way of putting it. I like to be like water flowing down a stream. I come across an obstacle, I'm not just going to stop at it. You flow your way around it. I think that's from my perspective, a philosophy of coaching.
I love that. I really do hope we do put those together. And it would be remiss of me, by the way, because I was remiss and I didn't know this, that it was also an important birthday of Nick's. Now, I'm not going to sing happy birthday, but nonetheless, I'm hoping Sam can put a happy birthday thing up or something here a few days ago. You don't look your age, Nick. 50, you don't look it at all.
Very kind. Thank you
so much, guys. I really,
Thank
as
you for
always,
joining us.
thanks again.